media, Shalom TV in India, and Sunday Shalom. And we know many more of you are picking up this broadcast, perhaps through shortwave radio or local diocesan radio stations, and to the many more of you joining through other internet or social media platforms. A bit of context Shalom to TV Pope Francis in India and Sunday Shalom visit here. And we know many more of you are picking up this broadcast. He has not met perhaps through shortwave radio yet, or local diocesan radio stations and the Indigenous Peoples. He did meet with a group on April 1st this last year, and he spent a few days with them listening to their stories of what happened to them in these residential schools. This past Sunday, the 17th of July, he asked all of us to pray for him. And he addressed these words to our brothers and sisters in Canada. He said, "As you know, I will come among you, above all in the name of Jesus, to meet and embrace the Indigenous peoples." Unfortunately, in Canada, many Christians, including some members of religious institutes, have contributed to the policies of cultural assimilation that in the past have severely harmed Native communities in various ways. For this reason, I recently received some groups in the Vatican, representatives of Indigenous peoples, to whom I expressed my sorrow and solidarity for the harm they've suffered. And now I am about to embark on a penitential pilgrimage, which I hope with God's grace will contribute to the journey of healing and reconciliation already undertaken.
The worst part of that is
Pope Francis left Rome on Sunday morning yesterday, departing at 9 o'clock Rome time, and he arrived at 11:20 in Edmonton at the international airport, where there was a small official welcome ceremony, which included Canada's Governor General Mary Simon and, of course, the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This morning, Pope Francis celebrated Mass in private and traveled here to Maskwacis by car. It's just about 70 kilometers, or about 43 miles from Edmonton. Now, these 6 days that Pope Francis will spend in Canada will be intense, not from a scheduling point of view, but from a very emotional and topical point of view, because this country is waiting for him, a country in which the original peoples have been wounded by horrors of the past. These Indigenous peoples' ancestors having suffered violence and deprivation at the hands of those who maintained a very colonialist mentality, which employed policies and practices of cultural assimilation with the goal, actually, of annihilating their Indigenous identities. As we heard Pope Francis calling this a penitential pilgrimage, he is coming to embrace the pain and suffering of the Indigenous communities. He's coming at their own request, a request that was made in the report from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was reiterated by the Prime Minister on a visit to Rome last year, and a delegation of Canada's Indigenous peoples also made this request of the Pope when they came at the end of March, that they wanted him to come to their own lands to acknowledge what harm, what sorrow, what pain they have suffered by members of the Christian community, and in particular the Catholic community. About 60% of these residential schools were managed by institutes, Catholic institutes of men and women religious. What we're hearing in the background is a preparatory program in which it sounds like one of them was remembering a visit that was paid to Pope Benedict in 2009. I believe it was a private audience in which Pope Benedict is said to have tried to describe the anguish that he has felt on hearing what the Indigenous people went through in these residential schools. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, ahead of this trip, also gave an interview with Vatican News.
And then I will speak.
This seemed to have sounded like when you've done a pretty high level diplomacy, you know, and like heads of state negotiations.
In the events that the Holy Father will attend, most of them are focused on the Indigenous populations. He will be here in the Edmonton area today and tomorrow, and on Wednesday he will go to Quebec and then Iqaluit, where he will visit an Inuit former residential school. In a meeting that the Holy Father had with a delegation of the Indigenous peoples from Canada, the Holy Father expressed both shame and indignation at the actions of Catholics. He said, "Listening to your voices, I was able to enter into and be deeply grieved by the stories of the suffering, hardship, discrimination, and various forms of abuse that you experienced." He said, "It's chilling to think of determined efforts to instill a sense of inferiority, to rob people of their cultural identity, to sever their roots, and to consider all the personal and social effects that this continues to entail, unresolved traumas that have become intergenerational traumas." So our Holy Father coming to Canada in a very different spirit than he generally visits a country. In addition to the languages that Vatican Media offers translation in, the other language broadcasts that are available through the Papal Visit site are Algonquin, Atimakwa, Cree, both East and Plains, Dene, Innu, Inuktitut, Mi'kmaq, Micmac, Mohawk, Ojibwe, and Wet'suwet'en. And all of those transmissions can be found at the site papalvisit.ca/watch. Now, many of the people who are gathered here were either residents at the residential schools or are descendants of residential school survivors. So as we gaze at them, we can only imagine that today will present mixed emotions for them. We try to live this with them. And because of the trauma that they've suffered in the past that might get brought up today, there are also mental wellness, cultural, and spiritual support teams that are available here to assist anyone.
Greatest symbol. What we did there was under attack for years. That's quite a shift in thinking and attitudes. It just doesn't happen overnight.
There will be about 2,000 people here. Most of them are survivors, but there are also elders, knowledge keepers, and those who are accompanying them who are seated inside this circle, which is called an arbor, which can seat about 4,000 guests.
Holy Father, today is a joyous day for the human spirit. It is a momentous day for our people and for our country, Kenya. While the past must never be forgotten, our destiny lies in building a future with enduring foundations, the cornerstone of which must be forgiveness. Our elders teach us that we have choices in life. We can build up or we can tear down. We can forgive with generosity of spirit, or we can seek sustenance from bitterness and vengeance. This day testifies to nothing less than the achievement of the impossible.
We see images being shown on the screen. One of them was the meeting that took place with Pope Benedict in 2009. A delegation also went at that point to as a part of this journey, this walking together that we're hearing about, to get to the truth of what happened, but also to move toward reconciliation with the descendants of those also in the Catholic Church who perpetrated such violence on these people. Now, Masquatchis is a Cree word. It means bare hills. This is the traditional name of this territory that was changed at a certain point to Hobbema. It was changed back into its original Cree name. And there are 4 nations that live within Masquatchis, and these include the Louis Bull, Montana, Samson, and Ermineskin nations. We did see the Holy Father's car arrive. This, what we're witnessing now, is part of a pre-program. It's about 10 o'clock right now, local time. And those participating here in this pre-program event have been listening to speakers. They've been hearing people talk about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. They've been hearing about the work of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, which actually just completed a search in the archives of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, who was one of the communities that, as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, ran most of the schools, but are now quite heavily involved in the healing process. They've also heard about a memorial banner project. This is a large banner that right now includes the names of about 4,000 children. They're documented from the National Student Memorial Register. And these names represent students of these residential schools across Canada that either died or who never returned home. They've also heard about the meeting between National Chief Phil Fontaine when he went to Rome in 2009 to meet with Pope Benedict.
Louis Bull Tribe, and Montana First Nation. We welcome you. On behalf of we would like to actually invite the chiefs.
What we're seeing now are 4 teepees, and now we're looking at the Ermineskin Cemetery. Our Holy Father will be visiting these area.
Everyone else, if you could please take your seats and remain in your seats. Please keep the front area of the stage clear. There are many people of you who are standing that want to see behind.
What we're seeing now are images from the Ermineskin cemetery. And now we're back to the arbor. This is also where, this is a very typical structure in many of the reserves, also where powwows, for instance, take place. The circular structure is highly symbolic and, of course, highly relevant also to Indigenous peoples, a sign of everlasting life, as it is also for us, a symbol of their unity with creation and the entire universe. And our Holy Father eventually will be entering into this structure. Here we see a mental health support worker. So we see they must be throughout the crowd for anyone who may need particular help during this particularly poignant. Here we see again in the cemetery, we see moccasins, baby moccasins on a cross here marking a grave. There are most certainly remains of former residential school children, students. The residential school that was here on Ermineskin was one of the largest in the country. Here we see another grave marked. Now, yesterday, our Holy Father flew from Rome to Edmonton. It was a direct flight. There were about 120 people on the flight, about 75 members of Vatican-accredited media personnel who are covering this journey, and about 35 members of the papal staff, medical people providing medical as well as security, as well as his entourage, the Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, as well as the substitute, Cardinal Peñapara, Archbishop Peñapara. 2 Canadian cardinals also formed part of this entourage from Rome. Cardinal Marc-Armand Olay, who is currently the prefect of the dicastery for bishops, and Cardinal Michael Cherny, who is the prefect for the dicastery for integral human development. He was also greeted by the Apostolic Nuncio to the country, Archbishop Ivan Yurkovich, as well as by members of the Canadian government, both provincial and national. Our Holy Father has been using a wheelchair, but he was able to make his customary greeting in the aisles, walking up and down the aisles in the plane. The only event that took place yesterday was the welcome at the international airport. This is his first public event, highly symbolic, since the very reason why the Pope is coming here is to be near and to embrace this people that has been hurt by the church of which he is the head. This is the 4th papal visit of a pope to Canada. St. John Paul II made 3 trips to Canada. His first was a 12-day trip in 1984. He was supposed to make a visit to Fort Simpson during that trip, but he wasn't able to land there due to bad weather. So at the end of his apostolic journey to the United States in 1987, Pope John Paul II made good on his promise and visited Fort Simpson. And the last time he visited Canada was in 2002 when he went to Toronto for World Youth Day. This is not the Pope's first visit to Canada. He visited Quebec as Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio and spoke at the International Eucharistic Congress in 2008. We've seen our Holy Father coming forward in his wheelchair. We're listening to hand drummer Jerry Saddleback playing and singing in a traditional manner to accompany the Holy Father to the entrance of Ermineskin Cemetery. For those listening through the radio, our Holy Father covering his eyes with his hand. Holy Father now approaching the cemetery. He, on his arrival, went to visit Our Lady of the Seven Sorrows Church, where he was greeted by the pastor of the community, an Indigenous priest, Father Gary Laboucaine, and the immediate previous pastor, Father Roger Rollo. They were then met by a small delegation of elders and local parishioners who welcomed him, gave him a traditional welcome to their territory. Our Holy Father now entering this cemetery. He'll be able to spend a few moments in silence here. We have to remember our Holy Father listened for 3 days, or received in audience 3 consecutive days, delegation from the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis and Inuit peoples of Canada, in which he heard firsthand their experiences, what they themselves experienced while attending residential schools run by Catholic members of the Catholic Church in their religious congregations. We join ourselves now in prayer with the Holy Father in an attitude of penance. We pray for all those who are buried here, some of them perhaps frequented these residential schools. This graveyard for us as well as for the Holy Father is a symbol of many others throughout Canada. The graves marked by traditional Indigenous art. While we pray for those buried here, we also pray for those who survived them. As we heard from the Holy Father's discourse, the trauma experienced in the schools, even though they've been closed, the last one closed in 1998, the trauma that is learned has often been passed on to the next generation. And will take generations to be able to heal. Our Holy Father now being taken, he is in a wheelchair. Now will be taken to the site of the first building that once stood here. Our Holy Father is here accompanied by the Archbishop of Edmonton. We see him walking to the Pope's right. Richard William Smith, who is the main organizer of this trip as well. Our Holy Father now exiting the cemetery. As I said previously, this is the first event, which is unusual. Generally, the Holy Father on his first day meets with civil authorities and members of the diplomatic corps, but instead he is meeting with survivors of the residential schools, which for more than a century aimed at assimilating Indigenous school children into the prevailing Eurocentric culture. Of course, the government at a certain point mandated this, and many of them, about 60% of the schools, were entrusted to various institutions of the Catholic Church who were operating in the educational field. This Ermineskin Indian Residential School, or what was formerly here, was one of the largest in the country, operated by Catholic missionaries from its foundation in 1895 until the federal government took over in 1969. And the school was closed in 1975. Our Holy Father here being greeted by a chief.
Hold it back. Thank you, Chief. Chief has been home. Thank you, Chief. Hope you have the holy welcome to our territory. Chief Vernon Saddleback, Samson Cree Nation.
Su Santidad, bienvenido a nuestro territorio.
Holy Father also being assisted by a translator as each of the chiefs introduces themselves and welcomes the Holy Father.
I'm Chief Randy Ermineskin. dar bienvenido a Human Skin. Este es mi presente.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you so much. So proud for you. Definitely proud.
The actual site where the Ermine residential school stood is here where we see the teepees. These 5 teepees, 4 of them represent each of the nations that occupies this territory here, the Lewis Bull, Samson, Montana, and Ermine Skin nations. And a 5th teepee marks what used to be the entrance to the school. As we said, this day, because it's being attended by survivors, may be a very emotional moment for them, who in very many ways continue to live the trauma of the abuse that they suffered in these schools. They were at times physically, also sexually abused. Corporal punishment being used if they spoke their own mother tongues or practiced traditional ceremonies. The delegation that met with Pope Francis in Rome asked him to come. They did receive an apology then, but asked him to come and make it here in their own territory. It's very important for them that this be done at home. Holy Father said in his speech on April 1st that all the things that he heard made him feel indignation and shame. Indignation, he said, because it is not right to accept evil, and even worse, to grow accustomed to evil, as if it were an inevitable part of the historical process. And he said, I also feel shame. I feel shame, sorrow, and shame for the role that a number of Catholics, particularly those with educational responsibilities, have had in all these things that wounded you, in the abuses you suffered, and in the lack of respect shown for your identity, your culture, and even your spiritual values. Our Holy Father in his wheelchair riding in silence, flanked by the 4 chiefs of the 4 nations that live here in the surrounding area. The person who will give the address or the greeting to our Holy Father is a former chief himself, Wilton Littlechild, a survivor of the Ermine residential school, who then became a lawyer and has been advocating for the rights of Indigenous peoples, even at the United Nations with the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. He served on the commission of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and was just named to the board of directors in January of the Bishops' Fund which they are collecting in order to be able to fund projects for healing among the indigenous populations that have been hurt. Those who have been already seated in the arbor, the ring that we saw earlier, have been able to watch our Holy Father's movements through large screens. The motorcade now moving toward the arbor. We see it just off to the right of our screens.
It's okay. It's okay. This one here?
When our Holy Father enters, he will be coming in through the south entrance. Directions are very, very important to the indigenous cultures. And once he himself is seated on the stage, we will also witness with him the entrance of, or the grand entry of the chiefs is what it's called. There are many other chiefs who will be participating in this meeting today. There are also many members of Canadian government here as well, senators and elected members of Parliament. The Minister of Indigenous Services should also be in attendance, as well as the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. Holy Father in his wheelchair, he did cancel a trip that was scheduled at the beginning of July to the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan due to an injury to his knee. The last apostolic journey our Holy Father made abroad was to Malta on April 2nd and 3rd. That was just a day after he received the delegation of the Indigenous Peoples of Canada in Rome. Pope Francis remembered the World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly yesterday on his flight from Rome. It would have been the second time, or it's the second time that the World Day has been celebrated since he established it on the 4th Sunday of July. And he said on the plane, just before reciting the Angelus, he said, "Today we need to go back to grandparents." I would say so as a leitmotif, in the sense that young people must have contact with their grandparents, going back to them, going back to their roots, not to stay there. No, but to take them forward like the tree which takes strength from the roots and carries it forward in the flowers and in the fruit. He emphasized how grandparents are responsible for the blossoming and maturing future generations, and they need to be respected. He also said, "I would also like to remember, as a religious, the old men and women religious, the grandparents of consecrated life." He said, "Please do not hide them. They are the wisdom of a religious family." And that the new men and women religious, the novices, we have to have contact with them so that they will give us the experience of life that will help us to move forward. He also thanked all the journalists accompanying him and reminded them that this journey is a bit different. It needs special attention, and a special spirit must be dedicated to this apostolic journey, since it is a penitential pilgrimage in which the Pope himself wants to show closeness to the indigenous people who have suffered. We now see the 4 chiefs who were accompanying the Holy Father just through the opening there in the back. Here we see the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And the chief we see in front of us, George Arcand, the Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations.
Heading down to my brother Elmer Rattlesnake.
We'll have the holiness just get comfortable up there.
This here is the Governor General, Mary Simon. Here we see a good aerial view of what is called the arbor. It's the round circle. It's also a typical where powwows are held. Our Holy Father now has climbed the stairs to the stage. He now has a cane in hand. We see the logo behind, walking together.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Our drum song, the drum, and all our drums right across Turtle Island. It is a symbol of the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It's a symbol of the heartbeat of each and every one of us. We have a heartbeat. It represents the heartbeat of all animals and living things. So it is very powerful. It's healing. And again, it is a very special afternoon to be able to witness this and have this very sacred song introduce our visitor. So at this time, we're going to go into what we call a grand entry. We're going to be honoring our chiefs. They will be coming in from the east side will be our current chiefs, and to the south will be our former chiefs. So at this time, we're going to go into a grand entry song, what we call a grand entry song. Aha. Singers, Nigabok. yeah, hiya. Ladies and gentlemen, our chiefs, every nation has an eagle staff. We have our eagle staffs leading our grand entry procession. The eagle staff represents our sovereignty. Our nations are represented by the eagle staffs. The history of our nations are represented with our eagle staffs. At this time, we're going to be coming in and calling in our great chiefs wearing the war bonnets. Our war bonnets are very sacred to us. War bonnets represent leadership of our nation, leadership amongst all our nations. The war bonnet, the eagle bonnet, represents who we are as a nation. So right here we got our Four Nations chiefs coming in at this time. Again, welcome to Muscogees.
Are these guys to the right though?
We have our four chiefs, our Four Nations chiefs, and also our Grand Chief, Dr. Wilton Littlechild. So ladies and gentlemen, on this side, Sagasteduk. Sagasteduk is the east. The east represents the sun. The sun gives us light. The sun gives us health. The sun is one of the most powerful things the Creator has given us. As people, as First Nations people, we acknowledge the sun for healing and health. Hiya! So right now we have our former chiefs. We also have represented here, we have all our chiefs within our territory, Treaty 6 territory, and also visiting chiefs from other First Nations in the war bonnets. Tapos mga kahigo, get nice kabik. Tapos higo, hego makisigaw. Tapos kakisiya, hego tahanma. Hanma mihtatamuin, Hego ma, hego tse, hego ma kapmise. Gawi mais spike. Tapwe. Tapn gasia pingo ek. Hekta kiam. Tapune tamik. Tapune tamak. Hel makiano tatsesun. Niga nimia. Hey tawase au kiam. Han makipmatsuin no ay suniga nimia. Kitawasim sinawag. Mina kakio go simnog. Minange kape no gostik. Hego takiam tapmotin getsik. Han makigoi, tagagi to kagotsik. Hey! Hey! Benatamok Matsuin! Betanamok! Hanma! Hey, Tabisakagin Tokagwik! Hey, Kota, Huyatawasuin! Pima Tehuin! Hey, Soniganimia! Kakiang! Hanma! Kainay Sidiwia! Kiang, Tapone, Taba! Kia wego, Mesos Digara Skamga. Ho, Vokiam. Hek Takat Staunena. No. Hey, wet da kaya, win. Trebagak tibagna ko ya kota ilok sebato. Hanmok sewat suin.
We continue to see various highly decorated people coming in, some carrying banners representing the nations they represent. And here we see banners. This could be the memorial banner that we heard about with the names of children who died in the residential schools. Our Holy Father did stop before this banner that was placed at the church that he visited earlier before arriving here, Our Lady of the Seven Sorrows. Those carrying this banner, it's quite long, it's wound around them. Beautiful way of making present if the children who went to these residential schools, of course, as we know in our Christian faith in some way, are still present. In God, as we remember them here on earth. Here we see the eagle staffs that were described at the beginning. And the drummers continuing to perform the grand entry song.
Hey, 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 hey. Maybe at this time, ladies and gentlemen, let's give everybody a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, over here, we have our Ogimawak. We also have our eagle staffs. The eagle staffs represent our warriors. We had to defend our territories. Our warriors had to defend the language. Our warriors had to defend our children, our grandchildren. We had to defend our language. We had to defend our way of life. So these eagle staff represent that, and also the war bonnets, they represent leadership. So at this time, we're going to honor our eagle staffs and the war bonnets, our chiefs, with the flag song.
Actually, you know what? Forget this. There's no getting the table. Sorry about that. We'll go this way.
Hi, hi, hi. Thank you very much there, singers. I'm going to ask you to sing one more song. Okay, do you have the victory song there, singers? Sing us the victory song as we honor. You know, we've been here since time immemorial, and it's 2022, and we still have our way of life. We still have our languages, and we're going to continue on living our way of life. It's only going to get better. This is what we call our victory song here at this time. Aha, we'll have our Eagle Staffs, our chiefs. Aha, name it. Sagwek, Sagwek warriors, where's your war call? Once again, warriors, let's hear your war call in celebration. Sagwek! Sagwek! One more time! Sagwek! Hi, 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 hi. Okay, gentlemen, you can post the Eagle Staffs there. We have areas that we're going to post our Eagle Staffs, and we'll have all our chiefs come back here. We're going to go into a healing dance here at this time, as soon as we have our Eagle Staff situated right around the center pole here. You know, circle, it represents life from the beginning, and it never ends. We're going to continue that journey. So again, the center pole, we have one of our biggest ceremonies where we have what we call the king tree stands in the middle of our lodge, and all of our nation's people come there to show the Creator. And you know, they have to go through a 3-day, 4-day fast where they're going to dance without food and water. But this arbor, you see, he represents that lodge. And again, gentlemen, you can make your way up to the front. And all the dignitaries, there is seating in front for you all. Astamik, hey, hey.
We now see the various chiefs coming up to take their place on the stage with the Holy Father. The chiefs representing the 4 local nations: the Louisbourg, Samson, Montana, and Ermineskin. The logo in the back flanking the backdrop behind us. We see once again this memorial banner winding its way through the arbor here. And someone is shouting all the children, all the names who attended our residential schools. My mom mattered. So they're bearing this banner throughout those here present, and it winds its way out of one of the exits here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a lot of survivors here, and this is a very historic event, and they wanted to be here. And we're asking everybody if you could just be seated. Be seated, please, ladies and gentlemen, because people want to watch. I know we have the big screens out there, but we do really want to watch him as he makes his and what he's going to talk about here. Quick. Okay, quickly, everybody, you can clear the area.
We're seeing some people here sitting on the grass now as people begin to take their seats.
Here, warriors, veterans, they're missing their chairs. Is somebody going to help them out? And everybody make a nice circle. We have people inside the circle. Kind of back up, back up. Everyone, back up.
As the camera pans the crowd, we're able to see some of the beadwork that many of these nations are famous for. Here we can see some on the headdresses. And here we see an up-close image of the banner, actually reading some of the names.
Kiam tapune tama chik tapune tama chik eugan matapue magam sweet teoche tapue ga petagote mstahe nanas komptinan tapue maga kagiwe tama suna awao tagiwe tama suna awao mamu sa skiup matsuin ekta kiam ka kio tipa hoanigo kap mohtin geg eteo chiga pe pasigoeg eteo skotemieg binekta tahtoga pe nakataego kinakatagan wag kawigiwe tamaog wagan maya kigo emiosik uhyot mamo taima se manto se watsuit. So ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to go to our sacred drum here with our singers. They're going to sing a special song again, and this is what we are going to be calling the healing dance. They'll sing the healing song, and we're going to have our dancers dance within this circle. And this will be all about healing, and the drum is a big part of the healing. It's the heartbeat of Mother Earth. The drum is life. Keep on walking, keep on walking, keep on walking there. Keep on walking. And security, if you want to kneel down up to the side so people can watch. You know, ladies and gentlemen, the number 4 represents the elements, the 4 directions, the 4 stages of life, the four living life forms. 4 directions. We have the sun rising from the east, and we also have from the south, we have the thunderbird. And over on the west side, we have the wind, the oxygen that we breathe. This is the government of Mother Earth. And on the north side, we have Mother Earth. Mother Earth is who we are. Mother Earth is all the plant life. Mother Earth, our mother, is also the mother of all insect life. Mother Earth is also the mother of all animals on the ground, in the water, in the air. Mother Earth, of course, is the mother of all humanity. Mother Earth is who she is. We are the children. We are the people of Mother Earth. Hi, hi.
For those joining through radio, we see highly decorated, beautifully dressed dancers, some men, some women.
Find a place out there, and we're gonna go next in our program here.
Your Holiness, Fancy Wapikihu, White Eagle.
And this is
It's a great honor
Chief
to welcome
Little
you
Child,
among
excuse
us.
me.
You have traveled a long way to be with us on our land and to walk with us on the path of reconciliation. For this, we honor you and extend to you our most heartfelt welcome. We wish to acknowledge with deep appreciation and gratitude the great personal effort you have made to travel to our land. It is a blessing to receive and host you among us. The vast expanse of land called Kaganatak, Canada, and which the Indigenous peoples refer to as part of Turtle Island, is the traditional homeland for the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Here in Musqueam, we are on Treaty 6 land, the ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux peoples since time immemorial. My name in Cree is Mahigant Moteo, Wolfwalker, Egwasaugiheo, Golden Eagle. In English, I am known as Wilton Little Child. I was a student here at the Ermineskin Indian Residential School, which for your visit among us this day represents all the residential schools in our country. Gathered here this morning with the peoples of Musqueam are residential school survivors, chiefs, leaders, elders, knowledge keepers, and youth from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across our land. We feel particularly honored to welcome as well the Governor General of Canada, Her Excellency Mary Simon, and the Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau. As a former commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I have heard nearly 7,000 testimonies from former students of residential schools in this country. During the recent visit to your home at the Vatican by a delegation of Indigenous survivors, elders, knowledge keepers, and youth, you also heard of the abuses so many of us have suffered at this and other residential schools. During our time with you, it was clear to us all that you listened deeply and with great compassion to the testimonies that told of the way our languages were suppressed, our culture taken from us, and our spirituality denigrated. Our spirituality denigrated. You have heard the devastation that followed from the way our families were torn apart. The words you spoke to us in response clearly came from the depths of your heart and were, for those who heard them, a source of deep comfort and great encouragement. On that occasion, you expressed your intention to visit with us on our land, and in this way express your strong desire to be close to us. And now, Your Holiness, you have come to our land in response to our invitation and as you promised. You have said that you have come as a pilgrim, seeking to walk together with us on the pathway of truth, justice, healing, reconciliation, and hope. We gladly welcome you to join us on this journey. As you acknowledged in your address to us in Rome, we Indigenous peoples strive always to consider the impact of the present events and deliberations on future generations. In that spirit, we sincerely hope that our encounter this morning and the words you share with us will echo the true healing and real hope throughout many generations to come. Kitatam hin, Your Holiness. Tawao, welcome to our land.
Words of former Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild, former Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who took part in the delegation of the Assembly of First Nations to Rome at the end of March and the beginning of April earlier this year. And now we prepare to hear the words of Pope Francis himself, long-awaited words, as we heard in response to the invitation that he received to visit the home of the First Nations, the Métis and Inuit populations living here in Canada.
Señora Gobernadora General, señor Primer Ministro, queridos pueblos indígenas de Masapsis y
Holy Father speaking in Spanish. Madam Governor General, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Indigenous peoples of Masquachis and of this land of Canada, dear brothers and sisters, I have been waiting to come here and be with you. Here from this place associated with painful memories, I would like to begin what I consider a penitential pilgrimage. I have come to your native lands to tell you in person of my sorrow, to implore God's forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation, to express my closeness, and to pray with you and for you.
Madam Governor General, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Indigenous peoples of Masquachis and of this land of Canada, dear brothers and sisters, I have been waiting to come here and be with you. Here, from this place associated with painful memories, I would like to begin what I consider a pilgrimage, a penitential pilgrimage. I have come to your native lands to tell you in person of my sorrow, to implore God's forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation, to express my closeness, and to pray with you and for you.
Recuerdo los encuentros que tuvimos en Roma hace 4 meses. En ese momento me entregaron en prenda 2 pares de mocasines, signo del sufrimiento padecido por los niños indígenas, en particular de los que lamentablemente no volvieron más a casa desde las escuelas residenciales. Me pidieron que devolviera los mocasines cuando llegara a Canadá. Los traje y lo haré al terminar estas palabras. Y quisiera inspirarme precisamente en este símbolo que en los meses pasados reavivó en mí el dolor, la indignación y la vergüenza. El recuerdo de esos niños provoca aflicción y exhorta a actuar para que todos los niños sean tratados con amor, honor y respeto. Pero esos mocasines también nos hablan de un camino y un recorrido que deseamos hacer juntos, caminar juntos, rezar juntos, trabajar juntos para que los sufrimientos del pasado dejen el lugar a un futuro de justicia, de sanación y de reconciliación.
I recall the meetings we had in Rome 4 months ago. At that time, I was given 2 pairs of moccasins as a sign of the suffering endured by indigenous children, especially those who unfortunately never came back home from the residential schools. I was asked to return the moccasins when I came to Canada. I brought them, and I will do so at the end of these few words, in which I would like to reflect on this symbol, which over the past few months has kept alive my sense of sorrow, indignation, and shame. The memory of those children is indeed painful. It urges us to work to ensure that every child is treated with love, honor, and respect. At the same time, those moccasins also speak to us of a path to follow, a journey that we desire to make together. We want to walk together, to pray together, and to work together so that the sufferings of the past can lead to a future of justice, healing, and reconciliation.
Y este es el motivo por el que la primera etapa de mi peregrinación entre ustedes se lleva a cabo en esta región que ha visto desde tiempos inmemoriales la presencia de los pueblos indígenas. Es un territorio que nos habla, que nos permite hacer memoria. Hacer memoria, hermanos y hermanas. Ustedes han vivido en esta tierra durante miles de años con estilos de vida que respetaban la misma tierra, heredada de las generaciones pasadas y protegida para las futuras. La trataron como un don del Creador para compartir con los demás y amar con armonía con todo lo que existe, en una viva interconexión entre todos los seres vivos. Así aprendieron a nutrir un sentido de familia y de comunidad y desarrollaron vínculos fuertes y entre las generaciones, honrando a los ancianos y cuidando de los pequeños. Cuántas buenas tradiciones y enseñanzas basadas en la atención a los otros y al amor por la verdad, en la valentía y el respeto, en la humildad, en la honestidad, en la sabiduría de vida.
That is why the first part of my pilgrimage among you takes place in this region, which from time immemorial has seen the presence of indigenous peoples. These are lands that speak to us. They enable us to remember. To remember, brothers and sisters. You have lived on these lands for thousands of years, following ways of life that respect the earth, which you received as a legacy from past generations, and are keeping for those yet to come. You have treated it as a sign of the Creator, to be shared with others, and to be cherished in harmony with all that exists, in profound fellowship with all living beings. In this way, you learn to foster a sense of family and community, and to build solid bonds between generations, honoring your elders and caring for your little ones. A treasury of sound customs and teachings centered on concern for others, truthfulness, courage and respect, humility, honesty, and practical wisdom.
Pero si estos fueron los primeros pasos dados en estos territorios, la memoria nos lleva tristemente a los sucesivos. el lugar en el que nos encontramos hace resonar en mí un grito de dolor, un clamor sofocado que me acompañó durante estos meses. Pienso en el drama sufrido por tantos de ustedes, por sus familias, por sus comunidades, en lo que ustedes compartieron conmigo sobre los sufrimientos padecidos en las escuelas residenciales. Son traumas que en cierto modo reviven cada vez que se recuerdan y soy consciente de que también nuestro encuentro de hoy puede despertar recuerdos y heridas y que muchos de ustedes podrían sentirse mal mientras yo hablo. Pero es justo hacer memoria, porque el olvido lleva a la indiferencia. Y como se ha dicho, lo opuesto al amor no es tanto el odio, es la indiferencia. Lo opuesto a la vida no es la muerte, es la indiferencia a la vida o a la muerte. Hacer memoria de las devastadoras experiencias que ocurrieron en estas escuelas residenciales nos golpea, nos indigna, nos entristece, pero es necesario.
Yet, if those were the first steps taken in these lands, the path of remembrance leads us, sadly, to those that followed. The place where we are gathered renews within me the deep sense of pain and remorse that I have felt in these past months. I think back on the tragic situations that so many of you, your families, and your communities have known, of what you shared with me about the suffering you endured in the residential schools. These are traumas that are in some way reawakened whenever the subject comes up. I realize too that our meeting today can bring back old memories and hurts, and that many of you may feel uncomfortable even as I speak. Yet, it is right to remember, because forgetfulness leads to indifference. And as has been said, the opposite of love is not hatred, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference. To remember the devastating experiences that took place in the residential schools hurts, angers, causes pain, and yet it is necessary.
Es necesario recordar cómo las políticas de asimilación y desvinculación, que también incluían el sistema de las escuelas residenciales, fueron nefastas para la gente de estas tierras. Cuando los colonos europeos llegaron aquí por primera vez, hubo una gran oportunidad de desarrollar un encuentro fecundo entre las culturas, las tradiciones y la espiritualidad. Pero en gran parte esto no sucedió. Y me vuelve a la mente lo que ustedes me contaron, de cómo las políticas de asimilación terminaron por marginar sistemáticamente a los pueblos indígenas, de cómo también por medio del sistema de escuelas residenciales sus lenguas, sus culturas fueron denigradas y suprimidas, y de cómo los niños sufrieron abusos físicos y verbales, psicológicos y espirituales, de cómo se los llevaron de sus casas cuando eran chiquitos y de cómo esto marcó de manera indeleble la relación entre padres e hijos, entre abuelos y nietos.
It is necessary to remember how the policies of assimilation and enfranchisement, which also included the residential school system, were devastating for the peoples of these lands. When the European colonists first arrived here, there was a great opportunity to bring about a fruitful encounter between cultures, traditions, and forms of spirituality. Yet, for the most part, that did not happen. Again, I think back on the stories you told, how the policies of assimilation ended up systematically marginalizing the indigenous peoples. How also, through the system of residential schools, your languages and cultures were denigrated and suppressed. How children suffered physical, verbal, psychological, and spiritual abuse. How they were taken away from their homes at a young age, and how that indelibly affected relationships between parents and children, grandparents and grandchildren.
Les agradezco por haber hecho que todo esto entrara en mi corazón, por haber expresado el peso que llevaban dentro, por haber compartido conmigo esta memoria sangrante. Y hoy estoy aquí en esta tierra que junto a una memoria antigua custodia las cicatrices de heridas todavía abiertas. Me encuentro entre ustedes porque el primer paso de esta peregrinación penitencial es el de renovar mi pedido de perdón y decirles de todo corazón que estoy profundamente dolido. Pido perdón por la manera en la que lamentablemente muchos cristianos adoptaron la mentalidad colonialista de las potencias que oprimieron a los pueblos indígenas. Estoy dolido. Pido perdón en particular por el modo en que muchos miembros de la Iglesia y de las comunidades religiosas cooperaron, también por medio de la indiferencia, en esos proyectos de destrucción cultural y asimilaron forzadas de los gobiernos de la época que finalizaron en el sistema de las escuelas residenciales.
I thank you for making me appreciate this, for telling me about the heavy burdens that you still bear, for sharing with me these bitter memories. Today, I am here in this land that, along with its ancient memories, preserves the scars of still open wounds. I am here because the first step of my penitential pilgrimage among you is that of again asking forgiveness, of telling you once more that I am deeply sorry. Sorry for the ways in which, regrettably, many Christians supported the colonizing mentality of the powers that oppress the indigenous peoples. I am sorry. I ask forgiveness. I ask forgiveness, in particular, for the ways in which many members of the church and of religious communities cooperated, not least through their indifference in projects of cultural destruction and forced assimilation promoted by the governments of that time, which culminated in the system of residential schools.
Aunque la caridad cristiana haya estado presente y existan no pocos ejemplares de entrega por los niños, con todo, las consecuencias globales de las políticas ligadas a las escuelas residenciales han sido catastróficas. Lo que la fe cristiana nos dice es que fue un error devastador, incompatible con el Evangelio de Jesucristo. Duele saber que ese terreno compacto de valores, lengua y cultura que confirió a sus pueblos un sentido genuino de identidad, duele saber que haya sido erosionado y que ustedes siguen pagando los efectos. Frente a este mal que indigna, la Iglesia se arrodilla ante Dios y le implora perdón por los pecados de sus hijos. Quisiera repetir con vergüenza y claridad: pido perdón humildemente por el mal que tantos cristianos cometieron contra los pueblos indígenas.
Although Christian charity was not absent, and there were many outstanding instances of devotion and care for children, the overall effects of the policies linked to the residential schools were catastrophic. What our Christian faith tells us is that this was a disastrous error, incompatible with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is painful to think of how the firm soil of values, language, and culture that made up the authentic identity of your peoples was eroded, and that you have continued to pay the price for this. In the face of this deplorable evil, the Church kneels before God and implores His forgiveness for the sins of her children. I myself wish to reaffirm this with shame and unambiguously. I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the indigenous peoples.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas, Queridos hermanos y hermanas, muchos de ustedes y de sus representantes han afirmado que las disculpas no son un punto de llegada. Concuerdo perfectamente. Constituyen solo el primer paso, el punto de partida. También soy consciente que mirando hacia el pasado nunca será suficiente lo que se haga para pedir perdón y buscar reparar el daño causado, y mirando hacia el futuro nunca será poco lo que se haga para generar una cultura capaz de evitar que estas situaciones no solo no se repitan, sino que no encuentren espacios. Una parte importante de este proceso es hacer una seria búsqueda de la verdad acerca del pasado y ayudar a los supervivientes de las escuelas residenciales a realizar procesos de sanación por los traumas sufridos.
Dear brothers and sisters, many of you and your representatives have stated that begging pardon is not the end of the matter. I fully agree. That is only the first step, the starting point. I also recognize that looking to the past, no effort to beg pardon and to seek to repair the harm done will ever be sufficient. And that looking ahead to the future, no effort must be spared to create a culture able to prevent such situations from happening. An important part of this process will be to conduct a serious investigation into the facts of what took place in the past and to assist the survivors of the residential schools to experience healing from the traumas they suffered.
Rezo y espero que los cristianos y la sociedad de esta tierra crezcan en la capacidad de acoger y respetar la identidad y la experiencia de los pueblos indígenas. Espero que se encuentren caminos concretos para conocerlos y valorarlos, aprendiendo a caminar todos juntos. Por mi parte, seguiré animando el compromiso de todos los católicos respecto a los pueblos indígenas. Lo hice en otras ocasiones y en varios lugares a través de encuentros y llamamientos, y también por medio de una exhortación apostólica. Sé que todo esto requiere tiempo y paciencia. Se trata de procesos que tienen que entrar en los corazones. Y mi presencia aquí y el compromiso de los obispos canadienses son testimonio de la voluntad de avanzar por este camino.
I trust and pray that Christians and civil society in this land may grow in the ability to accept and respect the identity and the experience of the indigenous peoples. It is my hope that concrete ways can be found to make those peoples better known and esteemed, so that all may learn to walk together. For my part, I will continue to encourage the efforts of all Catholics to support the indigenous peoples. I have done so at various times and occasions through meetings, appeals, and also through the writing of an apostolic exhortation. I realize that all this will require time and patience. We are speaking of processes that must penetrate hearts. My presence here and the commitment of the Canadian bishops are a testimony to our will to persevere on this path.
Queridos amigos, esta peregrinación se extiende durante algunos días y llegará a lugares distantes entre sí. Sin embargo, no me permitirá responder a muchas invitaciones y visitar centros como Kamloops, Winnipeg, varios lugares de Saskatchewan, en Yukon y en los territorios del noroeste. Aunque esto no es posible, sepan que están todos en mi recuerdo y en mi oración. Sepan que conozco el sufrimiento, los traumas y los desafíos de los pueblos indígenas en todas las regiones de este país. Las palabras que pronunciaré a lo largo de este camino penitencial están dirigidas a todas las comunidades y a los indígenas que abrazo de corazón.
Dear friends, this pilgrimage is taking place over several days and in places far distant from one another. Even so, it will not allow me to accept the many invitations I have received to visit centers like Kamloops, Winnipeg, and various places in Saskatchewan, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. Nonetheless, please know that all of you are in my thoughts and in my prayer. Know that I am aware of the sufferings and traumas, the difficulties and challenges experienced by the indigenous peoples in every region of this country. The words that I speak throughout this penitential journey are meant for every Native community and person. I embrace all of you with affection.
En esta primera etapa quise hacer espacio a la memoria. Hoy estoy aquí para recordar el pasado, para llorar con ustedes, para mirar la tierra en silencio, para rezar junto a las tumbas. Dejemos que el silencio nos ayude a todos a interiorizar el dolor. Silencio y oración. Ante el mal, recemos al Señor del bien. Ante la muerte, recemos al Dios de la vida. Nuestro Señor Jesucristo hizo de un sepulcro la última estación de la esperanza ante la cual se habían desvanecido todos los sueños y solo quedaban el llanto y el dolor y la resignación. Hizo de un sepulcro el lugar del renacimiento, de la resurrección, donde comenzó una historia de vida nueva y de reconciliación universal. No bastan nuestros esfuerzos para sanar y reconciliar. Es necesaria su gracia, es necesaria la sabiduría afable y fuerte del Espíritu, la ternura del Consolador. Que Él colme las esperanzas de los corazones, que Él nos tome de la mano, que Él nos haga caminar juntos.
On this first step of my journey, I have wanted to make space for memory. Here today, I am with you to recall the past, to grieve with you, to bow our heads together in silence, and to pray before the graves. Let us allow these moments of silence to help us interiorize our pain, silence, and prayer. In the face of evil, we pray to the Lord of goodness. In the face of death, we pray to the God of life. Our Lord Jesus Christ took a grave which seemed the burial place of every hope and dream, leaving behind only sorrow, pain, and resignation, and made it a place of rebirth and resurrection, the beginning of a history of new life and universal reconciliation. Our own efforts are not enough to achieve healing and reconciliation. We need God's grace. We need the quiet and powerful wisdom of the Spirit, the tender love of the Comforter. May He bring to fulfillment the deepest expectations of our hearts. May He guide our steps, take us by the hand, and enable us to advance together on our journey.
Our Holy Father has concluded his discourse, in which we heard several times his personal apology, at which point several times those here present clapped in recognition. And now we see two women climbing the stairs up to the stage. Our Holy Father in conversation. As they leave the stage with the gift in hand that they've been given.
Sung in the gravesite this morning at the same time. This is a song that was sung at the gravesite this morning at the same time, honoring the person that stood up and was able to come and not only say I'm sorry, but went one step further and provided some form of, asking for forgiveness, but at the same time moving forward and doing things for those people, and succeeding generations of those people. So it's with that we sing this song again for those children and for our great leader and Pope.
Again, we hear Jerry Saddleback, traditional Indigenous singer, singing in Cree. It's also a way of showing acceptance for the Holy Father's apology and an invitation to all those present in their own way and according to their own personal time to accept that invitation to move toward reconciliation. And Chief Wilton Little Child now with a headdress in hand, speaking with the Holy Father, and now putting the headdress on the Pope. Spontaneous performance of the Canadian national anthem here by one of the participants, speaking in an Indigenous language. And now we have the greeting of various dignitaries and other chiefs here present. This has been, as we have seen, the we do hear some crying in the crowds. This has been a very emotional day, as we know, having brought back for many a past that never can be truly left in the past, as we even heard the Holy Father say that there are memories that are present that need healing. But that in acknowledging and not forgetting those memories will help us move forward. This is the first event our Holy Father is taking part in here on his 37th apostolic journey. He's here in Canada visiting Masquachis. Masquachis, Cree name, is an unincorporated community. We're in central Alberta in Canada, just about 70 miles south of Edmonton. A Catholic mission was established here in late 1884 and 1885 by a priest named Father Constantine Skolin, who always referred to this as Bear Hills, which is where Masquachis comes from. We now see a chief coming up the stairs, helping an older woman. The city was later named Hobbema, which we heard before, after the Dutch painter the railway station was given that name, and then the area after that. Our Holy Father now greeting the woman who was helped up the stairs to visit him. This is the second papal trip this year. The last one he took was to Malta, the 2nd and 3rd of April. And as we've been hearing, the Holy Father himself received a visit from representatives of the Indigenous Peoples of Canada. This came about specifically after what was presumed to be a grave site was seen via satellite last summer, and news spread that another grave site from a residential school had been found, at which point the Indigenous Peoples once again requested a meeting with the Pope. Pope John Paul II, in his visit in 1984, and the address he should have given at Fort Simpson, which he then later gave via television and radio, expressed the teaching of the Church that on the indigenous rights of peoples. In some ways, he prepared the ground for the development of the relationship between the indigenous populations and the Church. Greeting the Pope right now, I believe, is Gerald Antoine. He's a regional chief and represents the Assembly of First Nations. In a very moving discourse that John Paul II gave at the National Shrine of St. Anne de Beaupré in Quebec, the Pope spoke about the importance of reconciliation between peoples if we truly believe that God created us in his image, he said, we shall be able to accept one another with our differences. And he himself added that only Jesus can break the chains of any form of selfishness. Then he declared that the Church of Jesus Christ is your church, he said. She is like those hiding places that your ancestors constructed all along the routes of their travels, so that no one might be caught without provisions. And then he said that word, hiding places, in several indigenous languages, as a way, he said, of drawing closer to express to you my fraternal affection. He repeated the word in Algonquin, in Montagnais, in Cree, Atikamekw, Mohawk, and in Micmac. John Paul II also visited the shrine of the Canadian martyrs in Huronia. Celebrating the Liturgy of the Word, there were about 100,000 people present there at that time. He recalled that it was one of his predecessors, it was Urban VIII in 1644, that designated that shrine as a place of pilgrimage, the first of its kind in all of North America. And he described the shrine as a symbol of the unity of faith in a diversity of cultures.
If I could kindly have your attention. I know everyone is anxious to be near the Holy Father, but we have some elders that were invited to participate to offer the Holy Father gifts on behalf of all the survivors. And we're just concerned about safety. It's pretty tight up here at the stage. If we could just get people to move back just a little bit for everyone's safety. This is a safety issue now, huh? So please respect. We have survivors that are seated who are anxious as well to watch this event and to appreciate this.
Our Holy Father now being vested in a stole. This may mean that we will be reciting the Our Father together.
We pattern our prayer on the prayer of Christ, our Lord, and say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The kingdom come, with the will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and we forgive us who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The Lord be with you. Blessed by the name of the Lord. Our help is in the name of the Lord. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Our Holy Father, having imparted his apostolic blessing here on the people gathered, there should be some traditional music and dance now. As a program will also continue after the Holy Father leaves. In his address at the shrine in Huronia, Pope John Paul II recalled the 8 Jesuits who lived at the mission, recalling that they laid down their lives. And they looked forward to a day when the native people would enjoy full maturity and exercise leadership in the church. And with these images, we now end this live broadcast from the Masquatchee Bear Park near Edmonton, Alberta in Canada, where Pope Francis has met with members of the Indigenous populations living in Canada on this his second day of his 37th apostolic journey to Canada. From here, Pope Francis will be driven to St. Joseph Seminary in Edmonton, where he will dine in private, and later this afternoon at 4:45 local Mountain Time, he will be meeting with Indigenous peoples and members of a parish community in Sacred Heart in Edmonton. I invite you to visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. You will find coverage of today's events and other Vatican and world news. On behalf of Vatican Media, I'd like to thank our audio technician, Adriano Vitali, and our coordinator, Alessandro De Carolis, as well as all of our media partners, Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World Television Networks, EWTN, Salt and Light TV, Shalom World TV, and Shalom TV in India, and Sunday Shalom. We'll be back around 4:45 for Pope Francis' second event for the day. We hope to see you then. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.
The priest has left, and we're all done here for today. We thank you all for all your beautiful remarks and etc. But we love you all and have a safe trip home. And thank you for coming to Musquachis. Hi, hi. And we'd like to ask you, go back to the same buses that you had come on, go to the same exits, and you'll get transferred back to your vehicles. Thank you. Hi, hi.